Hey, what's up, guys? Note Investor here. Hope everyone is doing well today. I'm going to make this a quicker live stream. Really just going to cover the markets, look at the BTC price action here in the near term, the good, the bad, and take a look at some of the alts here, some potential setups, maybe some rotation we're seeing into some of the bigger cap names. And so that's what we're going to be looking at. Of course, if there's some names you guys want to look at, by all means, let's take a look at those. I'll cycle through the alerts, through the watch list, and go from there. So hopefully everyone can hear me okay. If you can't, well, then you won't know that I'm saying this, but if you can, please say hello or a little something there, and we'll get on it here. Let me pull up the Slack just so we can monitor any questions, any comments that we got coming in there. Looks like we're good to go. All right. And so it's been a slower last couple of days for me. I haven't done a whole lot of trading other than just closing out some alt positions that were just really going stale, sitting a little flat for me. Didn't have the momentum I was looking for. I'll cover those here in a minute. And so at this point, I'm just holding 100%. Well, not 100%. I'm holding mostly BTC. I still have one trade open, VeChain, and I'm getting a little impatient with that one as well. I'll go over that one here shortly. But other than that, mostly just sitting tight in BTC. I was getting cautious yesterday. I did have a stop overnight my time before I called it a day down in here. And I thought for sure I was going to get stopped out. I was thinking this morning I'm going to wake up and things going to be sold or partially out or wicked or something. Didn't, surprisingly, to the upside. That's positive. It was looking a little bit like a bull flag yesterday, so that's why I didn't really want to sell and decided to just put a stop and see if what happens, right? Because I was always cautious that we might see one of these guys, right? One of the big smackdowns. But I was also worried we would see something like this where it does the wick both ways, and it would have taken me out and then pushed higher or vice versa. So that's why I decided to just put a stop. So I'm still holding it. We'll see where it goes here in the next couple of days. Volatility is absolutely contracting, and we're starting to kind of come to a little bit of a head. But while I am cautious, I'm slightly leaning more bullish today than I was yesterday. Some of the alts are coming back. BTC continues to hold above its resistance that it cleared. And so let's get to that here. And so looking at the broader price action, I'm going to go to the daily chart first just to kind of calibrate things from a higher time frame perspective. And in my last several updates, what I've been talking about was this near-term resistance that hadn't been cleared, which is cleared now. But that was this back here, right? And so we all last week, or really for the last 2 weeks, kept pushing into this range, kept pushing in this range. And this 39.60 officially was the number I was calling, 39.50, basically that range up here, right? Closing above that had been a challenge. Prices had not been able to, and I believe in my Friday update, let me see what I said here on Friday, and then I will be posting a new one of these here. But I was talking about first resistance 3900 and 3960, right? And so if we look at the chart back then, we were still in this little range, chopping around. Most indicators were basically flat and neutral. There was not a lot of direction at this point. It was just coming down to this resistance. And then I also mentioned the moving averages was my other key metric, right? So the direction of the move right here. So key metrics are the moving averages and the support and resistance levels. And that's still the same. That hasn't changed. And so looking at those two key metrics, of course, if you look at the moving averages, they continue to go higher, and they're starting to fan out a little bit now that prices have moved above that resistance. They're starting to push higher and they're spreading out a little bit, which is positive. That's what we want to see. I'd like to see a little bit more volume come in. The volume is not quite as convincing as I would have hoped, but nonetheless, price action trumps everything else first, so that's what we're going with. And so on the positive, prices did push above that resistance, and for the last several days, and I know this was over the weekend, but for the last several days, have held above that point. Now, what I would have liked to see is a push, maybe a pause, and then a quick spike higher. Haven't quite seen that yet, but it's still looking positive from that perspective. Still above the 10 EMA, well above the 22, and well above the 50 EMA on that perspective. If we look at it from the 4-hour view, this is what I was looking at yesterday. I was a little bit cautious because some of the names were drifting after the big push higher over the weekend, right? We saw that run, and there wasn't a lot of follow through, and it came right back. It tested it. That's fine. And then it started to go higher. And what I was expecting was after that retest of the breakout, I would have expected a new relative high, ideally pushing into that 4,100, 4,200 level. Didn't quite get that, rolled over again. And so yesterday, this is where I was getting cautious because you saw Litecoin break down. You saw some of the other names just kind of fail to push higher. And yesterday I was thinking, all right, it's still above support or prior resistance, now support. That's good. But if it breaks down and it loses that, then it's going to look like a failed breakout. It's going to look like this attempt was a failed breakout and we're rolling over. And so I was getting cautious. But the good news is here today, we're seeing this break the downtrend. And if you wanted to go super conservative and use the wicks as that break line point, then you can still see it's now above that here in the last candle, and volume is expanding a little bit as price pushes higher. And so that's good news. Still holding above that. The line in the sand continues to be the same now. We're on the other side of the line positively. So the other line in the sand now has moved up to basically 39.30, which was these two wicks here at the lows. So that little guy right there and that little guy right there, that's kind of my fail safe at this point. If it breaks below that, things are just not going to feel right. I'm going to get out of the way and wait for things to play out. But for now, we're holding above it. And at this point, things look like they want to start pushing higher now, right? Oops. They look like they want to edge a little bit upward. And so that's the direction that I'm leaning, is for some more upside action. Now that we're clearing here, kind of curling up the right side. Again, I'm mostly BTC here at this point. It's going to be interesting to see how the alts act. They've had a pretty good run during this choppy phase of Bitcoin. Now I'm wondering if Bitcoin does a little catch up and we see some rotation back into BTC until we get to the next resistance level. Then maybe the alts play some catch up here. What we tend to see is, for example, back here when Bitcoin had this quick spike higher, or even back here, a lot of the alts generally will see a very short term or a brief pullback versus BTC, just because they're not keeping up with the monster move that that happens like that. And when you get a move like that where it's like 5% up in an hour and massive volume, a lot of the alts will tend to pull back. And so that wouldn't surprise me if we saw a spike up here at this point to test these prior highs. Maybe you see a little pause in the alts or a slight pullback, which is why I'm okay being in BTC right now at this point. Plus, it's kind of protecting the gains from the last few alt trades, so just kind of sitting tight on that. But overall, not too bad. Can't complain. RSI is finally starting to push higher. If I zoom in here a little bit for you guys, RSI, MACD is a little harder to see, but you can see the histograms are ticking up, very close to crossing over green again. RSI is pushing higher, and so from that perspective, looking positive. Not too much to complain here. As long as we see that support level hold, I'm going to lean in favor of the bulls. The alert system, of course, if we go back to the home page here, the BMI indicator is blue across the board, meaning all time frames are 90 or above, and the matrix, which looks at the 4-hour and the 24-hour combined, is saying strong, which is the highest reading. Yesterday it had gone down from strong to barely bullish, now back to blue. So the way I use that is when we're either bullish or strong, I've got the green light to take altcoin trades to the long side versus BTC, because I'm using it as a risk screen basically. When it says cautious or weak, I'll generally refrain from taking too many alt trades, and generally I may even close out some alt trades if I'm currently open on some. So that's how I use that. But right now, everything is green lights, all systems go. BTC is looking positive here. One thing I did note yesterday, let me see how it looks today. Probably looks a lot better today, but maybe not a lot better, but it looks certainly much better. Yesterday, when I was looking at this BMI watch list, most of the names on here were like small cap, kind of crap coins. And when Bitcoin was supposedly breaking out and there was nothing in the big cap space on the list, I was a little bit concerned. Today, that looks a little bit better. You've got Cardano, you've got Icon, Zcash, Quantum, Stellar, Ontology, right? So you're starting to see some better names on the list. It's not just a bunch of the crap coins, but that's good news. So starting to see some of those come back to life here. So let's take a look at a few of those names, and then we will cycle through very quickly and see what you guys want to look at. I'll start with the big names here first, looking at ETH. Look at it from the BTC pair, ETH BTC on Binance. This is one that, you know, for lack of a better word, has just been flat, right? It's just kind of been consolidating really ever since the big drop that we saw here at end of February. Just been choppy, has not been leading the way up versus Bitcoin. Bitcoin's actually been outperforming since then. Not a huge dramatic fall, but you know, not looking positive yet. The good news is it's still above this low point here, right? And so that's the positive here. This breakout candle here has now served as support twice here in the recent past. And so that's good as long as it continues to maintain above that. That's going to be positive, but ultimately I want to see it now take out this little double top high that it put in here and here. And so that translates to about, call it 3,600 basically. Above that, things start to look a lot better and start to show that this is turning the corner, and you'll likely see a little bit of a retest of that high. And now you got like a little bit of a cup type of formation, which on the bigger scheme of things starts to form an ascending triangle pattern here in the very big picture. And so what I'd be looking at is this, right? If it starts to push higher from here, then I'd be looking at that. And I'd be looking at an early entry signal on the breakout, which would be down here. And so that would be very nice to see that. Let me clear these bottom arrows. And you can see this horizontal support now starts to line up with this trend line, potential trend line that's forming, and price is sitting right above it right now. So if we can get this little rotation higher into this most recent swing high, 3,800, 3,900, then it's going to start to look more like an ascending triangle base at this point. Some people may say it's a little bit more of a symmetrical breakout. That's fine. Either way, the line's going to be the same. If you're trading it on a symmetrical pattern or if you're trading it on an ascending triangle base, I would take an earlier entry, be more aggressive if it were me. But if you were playing it on a pure symmetrical triangle base breakout, then your breakout point is not until it clears this, right? That would be a new higher high. And that's traditionally how you play that breakout. But I'd like to get in a little early. So if it broke above the trend line and this horizontal line, I'd be getting in here at this point here. An alternative, of course, is you buy at support and you get in right here with a very tight stop. It's a very nice entry here at this point. You're being preemptive, but the flip side is your stop is tighter and you've got, you know, potentially just an edge-to-edge trade here where you're just buying from the bottom of the pattern to the top. You can take some profit here, cover your risk, and then you let the rest ride in case it breaks out. And so that's a good way to do it. And the advantage with doing that is you can size up much bigger when you buy near a low support point because, come on, here we go. Because what I'm looking at here is I've got a very clear stop, right? If it undercuts these two bars, I'm out. That's about a 3.5% stop loss level. Even if I take profit into the top of this triangle, that's a almost 11% gain. That's a 3-to-1 ratio. Just by itself, that's a good enough trade for me. Just buying here with this low risk, selling here, that'd be a 3-to-1 ratio. That's a good enough trade for me at that point. And then, of course, if it breaks out, then that's a whole nother trade at this point. I'm looking at it totally different. Wider stop, all this other stuff, right? Bigger target. That's a whole nother trade at that point. But that's what I'm looking at. So ETH is looking good here if it can bounce off of this support. That's the big if, right? Can it hold right here? If it can, it'll start to put a lot more confidence in some of the other alts, in my opinion. So definitely a must watch. It's a good barometer for some of the other alts and what potentially could happen in that space. And you can see since, you know, this drifting lower, most of the big cap names have been following suit. There haven't been some, you know, any of these monster moves in the big cap names. And that makes sense because BTC has basically been choppy since then, but it's now perking up. And I'm still watching the big picture. In the big scheme of things, BTC, if it breaks out above this longer term resistance that's been in place since December, that's going to be a very strong move. And it is wedging up into that, right? You can see here this little bit of a trend line. There's two trend lines now forming, right? You've got this higher high that formed back here. You can certainly extrapolate that out, but now the new one is basically this. And this is, you know, much steeper, starting to build some momentum. And so that's positive. We'll see here. I mean, I was talking about a potential inverse head and shoulder pattern It's a sloppy one, but it's still valid in my opinion. Just the general signatures there, right? You've got this run up that culminated into a pause that created the first shoulder. Then you got this new low, ran up right to the same point. And this would have been a nicer shoulder if it would have run sooner, right? It's starting to get really long, but the signature is there, higher, low. It also corresponded with the Fibonacci retracement levels, which very often the inverse head and shoulder patterns do, meaning the right shoulder will hold at the 618 or above, and this one did. And so, you know, it's a sloppy one, but the psychology, the general price action signature is still there. And so I'm looking at it from that perspective. But at the end of the day, whichever way you're looking at it, it's all the same, right? The inflection point is the same. If it gets above this breakout point, whether you're looking at a triangle, whether you're looking at a higher highs and higher lows or a symmetrical pattern, however you're looking at it, at the end of the day, that's a significant inflection point. That's going to be a breakout, and things will get pretty interesting at that point. We'll see where they go from there. So that's what I'm looking at here from BTC side. If we look at Ripple, just because it's a bigger cap name, has a lot of significance on the BTC dominance. It's just not on my radar yet. I know a lot of you guys will generally ask me about it. There's nothing I like about this chart. So until this turns, it's just not on my radar at this point. BCH was showing a lot more positive action here as of late. I mentioned this one in my last update as a strong BMI name. It was basically the first day off the breakout. Back here at the time, it was during this candle here, and has continued higher here. It was a breakout candidate. It has since broken out. You can see it's cleared that 3,700 level and edging higher. It did give you a little bit of a re-entry point here. It broke out, pulled right back. You can see there was a wick that ended right there. That would have been a nice re-entry point. If we zoom in here on the 4-hour view, you can see that this was the breakout candle, pulled back, held the breakout point, undercut it slightly, but that was just a wick. Low volume on that pullback too, by the way. I mean, it was higher than the prior bars, but compared to the breakout candle, very low, which is what you want to see. And then it held, recovered quickly. The way I would have traded this is if you didn't have a buy order at the above the breakout point, you wait, because you never know if this is like, going to just slice right through, be a failed breakout and continue lower. And so you may want to wait for that first green candle, or even the next one that confirms it, and then jump in on one of those two. And then put your stop basically right either at the low of that wick or at the breakout point, which is usually what I do. That's the impulse candle, right? That massive volume, the big push through resistance. The way I see it is if that fails, then that's the buyers lost control at that point, right? Because these buyers pop this thing right through. If they fail to hold that low, I'm out of the way. Whoops. And so that's how I usually will play those. And by now, I would have moved my stop up anyway because it's already made a new swing high and relative high. So it's already moving up. So looks pretty good there. Let me see, how high can this bad boy go? Next swing high up is this right here. That's a major resistance point. If BTC can break out, this may be one to continue to ride higher up until that resistance zone. Could outperform Bitcoin. And this is going to be another 20% plus, 20, 25%. So we'll see if we can get there. Quick question here. No, what do you think about stochastic RSI, the BTC weekly? Let me see. It's getting a bear cross, red weeks. Yeah, so BTC it's interesting here just because let me pull up this. This is going to go white, by the way, so blink a few times. Oh, let's see. So what I'm looking at here, let me go to, I use this as a volatility metric, right? So this is my volatility indicators. I don't use it a whole lot, but what it has on here is it's got Bollinger Bands, which is this red and white or red and blue on the outside. I'm not a big user of Bollinger Bands personally. It has Keltner channels, which I like a lot more than Bollinger Bands because Keltner channels are based on the ATR, which is the average true range. So it just kind of measures volatility based on recent average true range. And you could do a 2 or 1.5 or 3 or 1.5. I generally will do a 1.5, but if you want to go wider, 3 Keltner channels generally like the most, right? That you'll generally see prices contained within. And so that's what I use. But the reason I mentioned this is when you start to see the Bollinger Bands squeezing within the Keltner channels, generally there's some sort of a breakout, right? You saw it back here. It's happening again right here. Look at these, the blue and the red are starting to squeeze within this purple zone. And so that generally precedes some volatility, right? Also, the ATR, the average true range, is dropping, which means the price range is starting to get narrow. And then here, this is just kind of an oscillator that I use. It's basically a 2-period RSI. You only take it at the extremes here. And even though it looks high here, it's kind of not at an extreme. It's got to be like at 95. So that being said, if it breaks out from here, this, the RSI is going to be at the extreme already. I'd be a little bit more cautious. But if it just sits tight and then breaks out here, it looks pretty good from that perspective. On the daily, though, and the weekly, and I'm going the long way to answer your question, right? This is like right smack in the middle here, approaching the middle Keltner channel band, which is generally resistance here. And so, people look at RSI stochastics. You look at the 2-period RSI on the weekly. It's already here at the highs. That could be used as an oscillator. And that tells you maybe you're a little bit overbought here in the near term and looking like we might pull back. So there's some conflicting metrics here for sure. But the thing is, it's also right at this resistance level, right? It's right here. And I mean, at this point, if it just sits tight and busts through, the price action has been so slow that a lot of these oscillators, they don't really carry as much significance when price action is moving slow and sideways, because it's not as momentum driven, right? And the oscillators, that's what they're helpful with, is when you're trending higher, you wait for those pullbacks and the oscillator cools off, and then you buy the dip, and then when it goes higher, right? And so that's how I tend to use the oscillators. And so that being said, I'm not giving these a whole lot of weight right now personally. I'm not looking at the RSI on the longer time frame, positive or negative, right? I mean, it's just been flat. If you go to BTC here, go to dollar, right? I mean, it's good that it's coming off the lows. It's just edging higher. MACD, you look at the MACDs going upward, so that's positive. No signs of a top yet, but at the end of the day, I'm just going off of price action. That's probably going to be your best indicator here. There is another potential resistance point that I'm watching, and that is the 22 EMA on the weekly, which right now is up at around 43.40. And so if you get a breakout, I'd be watching that to see if that is maybe where some sellers show up. So there's just so many hurdles along the way up at this point, right? Just because the price has seen such a big drop. The good news is this has been a nice low, a nice base that even if it pops up here and then decides to pull back, I'd still be looking at this as some support levels right now. And in the bigger scheme of things, right? Maybe not for April, maybe not for March, but in the bigger scheme of things, we may be establishing a big long-term low. And so that looks positive here. It's just going to take some time before anybody can look back in retrospect and say, oh, that was the low. It could have been. It's very possible that December was the low, right? Capital THE low. But I mean, it's just such a narrow range in the big scheme of things. It's really hard to say. I mean, if you got another crazy sell-off like here or here, very quickly would erase all of this price action from the last 2 months and just drop to a new low, right? So that's just how vulnerable it is right now. And that's not unusual. If you look at, the last history of price action, I mean, most of the weekly price action is much wider than what we're seeing here. The last time we saw such narrow price action was right before the big break back here. But even leading into that, up, down, pretty wide swings. After August, things got pretty tight. And here in the last couple of weeks, pretty tight. So it could certainly go either way. But in the big scheme of things, it's looking interesting here, potentially forming a long-term low. How, this is, so just so you guys know, this is what I'm looking at as like confirmation that the low is probably in. And if you look at the moving average crossovers for the long-term time frames, but the 1022 crossovers generally do a pretty good job of confirming that long-term price action. So for example, and that's always late, of course. That's why I don't use moving average crossovers as like my early indicator. But here was the crossover negative, never crossed back over. Prices are still inverted back here. if you look at the positive, the last time it went positive was way back here. And then here you had a false positive, but still marked the low. And then, of course, this was the negative the last time it went positive. So, I mean, I'll tend to use those long-term ones. But if we do the historical point of view, during the last big bear market, you know, these moving averages crossed inverted. They finally crossed over here, short-lived, undercut again, but prices were basically forming this long time low, multi-month. This was basically January through September here, and then moving averages crossed over again, and it never looked back from there. It was just, you know, they stayed positive all the way through the next bull market. And so on the weekly chart, you know, that's kind of a nice little confirmation tool that I use. And you can see this was a negative here back in March, and it never looked back from there. And it's still negative, right? So you could have that price run up to here, and then the moving average runs up, and then it starts to roll back over again. That's certainly possible, right? But if it starts to continue higher and brings these moving averages up, then you may begin to look back and say, hey, December, which at that point will be like 9 months back, you'll say, hey, December was pretty good. That was the low maybe. All right, so let's get back to some alt trades, look at some near-term price action for the near-term trading. So BTC, again, key price points to watch are this near-term support, but right now looking positive from that perspective. Cardano had a very strong move today. Let's look at Cardano, Icon, and Zcash, and we'll go down the list here, look at a few names. So looking at Cardano. Cardano has been a tough trade, to say the least, but it finally hit the target that I was looking at. I was looking for 1320 to about 1350. It wicked right into that target. A lot of volume, but you know, still no major sell signals. It's just marching up higher. It's been a slow grind up, but it's continued to grind higher ever since breaking out of this little 1200 level. That was really the breakout point. I mean, it took a few days, ground all the way back, and then popped. Nice little rally, and then a few more days of grinding lower, and then pop, right? So it's been a slow hold, but still the trend is upward, right? Higher highs, higher lows. This is kind of marching to that target that I was looking at here. That's a long-term target. That's that big breakout point, the resistance point here that I've been watching. And it's basically right there now. So, I mean, almost, not quite. If you want to hold out to like 1350 or something, that's really the target. But still looking good ever since this double bottom. That was really the signal, right? This double bottom hold rallied higher once it broke out above this. It was just kind of a good hold during that time frame. It's still looking good. And generally what you'll see is these trends will start to accelerate. And so right now it's kind of this trend. If it starts to really get going, you can start to see one of these kind of trends where it's a little bit more steeper. And so we'll see if it can break out of there. If BTC gets going, I wouldn't be surprised to see this one break out. EOS, still on my watch list. I did take a small entry on this one, and then I just went flat on it just because I didn't like the lack of momentum. But symmetrical here, getting very tight. So that's what I'm watching. If EOS can clear out of this range here, basically that 95, 9600, then this could take off and retest these prior highs, basically around 10.5, 10.6 is what I'm looking at for the next first target here on EOS. So that's what I'm looking at there. But of course, that's assuming it holds. If it breaks below this here, which is basically the 9,000 even, a break below this trend line will be the early indicator, but a break below here is really going to confirm a descending triangle at this point. So that's what I'm watching. But right now, it's already approaching this near-term oversold stuff on the 4-hour. If the market gets going, we could see this one run higher here. BNB, I'd be cautious on BNB here. This was looking like a potential breakout setup here, and it still technically is, but now it's starting to feel a little bit more like a distribution phase to me. And if you zoom in here and you look at this last candle, right, this guy here with this big volume selling, that's negative. That's a very bearish candle. I know it's got a big wick closing the upper half, but it's negative. If it would have closed a little bit higher, it would have been your traditional hanging man candle. But either way, it's a bearish candle. And so I'm cautious here. If you want to keep an eye on this one, a break below the low of that wick, 37.5, it's going to be negative and will likely accelerate, and this thing will start to form like a rounded top. So the fact that the volume was so high on there is what's giving me pause on this guy here right now. Above this line would still be a good breakout candidate. And you can see the lower, if let's say that's the low and it holds, you know, there's still this rising trend, this ascending triangle wedge that's forming. That's fine too, but I'm a lot more cautious here, especially considering how extended it is in the longer term time frames. Icon. Let's go take a look at Icon. ICX was looking pretty good here too. I like the fact that it came right back to this breakout point and just barely wicked it right there. And strong follow through on the upside after that wick, a little bit of a pause on the bull flag type of action. And then here in this latest candle, going green. So either one of these would have been good signals. Either this guy here or this latest candle here is a good buy signal there. And the way I would play that is, let's say you entered here. At most, the low of that is your stop. You could probably play it a little bit tighter now that it's put in this bull flag, which is generally how I would do it. And so I'd put in probably a little bit below the lows of that last candle there. And you'd be looking for at least a 2-1R. And, you know, that's kind of a middle zone here. It's like in no man's land because you're going to have some resistance right here. That barely give you 2-1. And then, of course, you know, your most recent highs, this window up here is going to be your next big resistance. If it gets that high, that'd be a fabulous trade, right? I mean, you're talking, you know, a 13% upside with a 3% downside or 3.5% downside. So not bad. And then, of course, above that, you've got plenty of room to run on the upside if it can clear that level. On the daily chart, it's looking like a nice pullback entry, bullish engulfing candle on the daily. Let me clear all this stuff. Here we go. And so on the daily, it's looking like a good early entry signal. Not even confirmed yet. It's just now barely starting to close. So if it closes, even if it closed right here, let's say today this was the end of the close, that'd be good enough for me. Volume is above average. It's above the last few days. It's going to engulf the prior 2 days. This is your classic 1, 2, 3 reversal candle, meaning the bottom of the green didn't engulf the last red candle. But if you look at these combined, right, these two reds and this green one, it's 1, 2, 3 reversal. I'd be looking at that as a potential entry point. And the fact that it held the moving average pair on the daily chart. It went right back to the 10 EMA, the 22 EMA, touched the breakout point. And this is just a confluence of support right there. And so it makes for a favorable risk-reward entry point because you've got a very clear stop point. And this looks like maybe the pullback may be over for Icon after, what, a week and a half or so. So that's looking pretty good. Probably on the top of my watch list right now in terms of some of the big names. I'll go over VeChain here just because I'm still holding this one. Been testing my patience. But I entered VeChain after it broke out here. I had a buy entry point. I actually had two. I split my order in two. I had one right at the line, and then I had another one after the line triggered. I was banking on a dip. That one never filled. And so when it settled out on the shorter time frames up here, I added the second half at around like 130 or something. It was looking pretty good, but it's just been pausing ever since. But there's no reason to sell just yet. It's still holding above the breakout point. It's holding above the moving averages. The volume on this pullback has been very constructive during this here, very light. And so from that perspective, I don't have a big reason to sell. I was a little cautious with BTC. So I did unload some of my other alt trades. I was a little heavy. I had like 5 or 6 alt trades. And I thought, no, Bitcoin's looking vulnerable here. I'm just going to go back to BTC, wait this one out. And decided VeChain, you can hang out. I'll leave VeChain alone. So I decided to leave that one open. It's not a big position. It's maybe like, you know, it's my typical risk reward position. So it's not huge, but I'm going to leave it open. We'll see where it goes. It's still looking good. If I can see another big volume spike like that, I'd be happy. And then I'd be looking for a push into, you know, this upper 150s, 160 range on VeChain. That's kind of my next big target here to the upside. If I get that, then this will turn into, let's see here. This would turn into about a 20% upside trade. And at this point, I have a very tight stop on it. It's basically just below break even. So it looks like this think my stop is like 127 or 128 or something. So it's pretty tight. So basically, I've covered most of my risk now, and I'm just going to wait, see what it does, and go from there. So VeChain's the only alt I have open at the time. Other than that, everything is in BTC. I did close out the last of my OMG. I had this as my original trade. I entered here on this guy, and then it paused, and then it had that big wick right up here. And this is one of the few examples where, one of the few times where my wick order entry was actually filled favorably. I had an order entry to trigger at 420, and my order fill was at 424, and so I got very lucky. And then I had that order split in two, so I had two orders. The first one was fill at 420, and the second one was fill at 440. Of course, that never got filled. Prices pulled all the way right back. I gave it some time all week. I just held it. I held it. I was thinking, well, that stinks. You know, I saw this red one pull back the next day. I thought it was going to get going again. Never did. Came all the way right back. And honestly, it's probably still a good buy at this point. It's probably a good secondary entry point. So I'm flat on this one. I sold the first half here, sold the second half yesterday here. Small green on the second half. Nothing to write home about. But you know, now that it's kind of reset, it's right back to the breakout points, right back to the 10 EMA. I'd be looking at this as a new trade. I'd put my stop basically right down in here, so maybe about a 4 to 5% stop. First target, of course, would be the top of this wick now. Can you get that again? That's about a 3.5R multiple. And, of course, if it breaks higher, then you're looking at 470, and that's your 25% range here. So not a bad trade setup. You know, it did run into resistance, same point twice. So that's kind of interesting that, you know, that tends to happen so much. And, you know, that's a good aside here, just to kind of break things up a little bit. Don't get me wrong when I say this. I'm not against indicators, obviously. But too often I see a lot of charts that have like 6, 7, 10 indicators overlaid. You've got friggin' RSI and MACD and 4 moving averages and pivot points and TD sequentials and custom oscillators and guys, you know, VPVR plus VR volume and just all kinds of stuff. And it's like, you don't need that much indicators. One, if you have that many indicators on all the time, it's going to be very confusing and very conflicting. And generally, you use different indicators for different things. So depending on your strategy, if you're looking for a pullback entry, then you may have some oscillators on there, some momentum indicators to give you a good precise entry. If you're using moving averages for your indicators, then, you know, use that. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is price action and support and resistance levels. I mean, that is fundamental, support and resistance levels, right? That's just so key. And you'd be surprised at how much you can get done just looking at price action, support, resistance levels. The indicators are there to confirm what you think you're seeing in the price, not to lead. Indicators don't lead, they indicate, right? That's the old saying. They don't dictate, they indicate. And so just keep that in mind, guys. I mean, I would challenge you, if you have multiple indicators, I would challenge you to see which ones you can get away with not using anymore. And it'll make your life so much simpler. You'll think more clearly, I promise you, when you're not looking at 10 different signals and getting confused. And if your system requires that many, there's probably room for simplification. So just a heads up, I see it so often, and it's almost like, damn, you can't even see the price candles anymore with all the crap you got on your charts. And then you go to TradingView, and some of the charts that people share just really make me laugh. But it's like they marked them all up to hell, and it's like, okay, and what am I supposed to do with all? Keep it simple. Keep it simple. So anyway, that's my recommendation. Of course, if it works for you, go for it. The other one was GoChain. I did take an entry on this one. I closed it out flat, slightly in the green, but just basically a flat trade for me. I jumped in over the weekend. This was one of the few trades I did take over the weekend. I had a buy order filled here. Looked like it was going to get going. Pulled back, never hit my stop, took off again. I was liking it. And yesterday started to drop again, and it was just kind of consolidating right here. And so I closed it out right there, basically slightly in the green. For me, all intents and purposes, it's a flat trade. And it's drifting a little bit lower, but it's still setting up in the big picture. It's still holding up. You can see here it's still holding above this trend line, still holding above this breakout point. It's basically dancing right around that. And so I'm watching it, but I'm going to wait to see a little bit more upside confirmation. If it pulls in a little bit further and hits this line, let's say just kind of goes sideways, hits the line, I may take a shot at it there with a small position, early entry with a very tight stop. So something I'm looking at here, but you know, not too bad. I mean, it's still looking pretty good from the big picture. If you go to the daily chart, it's, you know, it's testing this resistance, breaking out, holding above the 10 EMA in the daily. And so it's still very much in play. I'm watching it here. It did fail a little bit at the top end of this range here. See this guy back here? That's basically where it failed. So we'll see, but it's still looking good. Let's see here. So we covered some of the big names: Omi, Sego, VeChain, Cardano, Dash. Never did anything with it. I almost jumped in on it again, but I decided to wait. Kind of glad I did. It's still just kind of chopping around. I do like the fact that it undercut all of this support just recently. See that? It just wicked right below, made a new relative low, barely by like a penny. I like that just because it tends to clear out the stops. It tends to kind of wash things out. And then if it gets going after that, that's usually a pretty good sign, a low risk entry for me. The fact that it's right at the 10 EMA on the daily, under just a little bit, 22 is still down here, so it could go lower, but this one's looking pretty good here. But again, I want to see some upside confirmation, some volume come in, but this second swing low may be it. So going to keep an eye on it here. If it does continue lower, let's say it makes one more push to the downside, then I'd be still watching it around that 2200, 22.2. And ideally, that's where the moving average catches up. So it'll be right in the zone there. And so that's what I'm watching. But on the radar, not too bad. Let's see here. All right. I think that's it for me. I'll let you guys run through some names if you guys want to take a look at those. But for now, I'm kind of leaning big cap now, which is good. I'm kind of leaning more big cap again. Last week was kind of the micro caps. We saw some interesting moves, some pumps and dumps, but seeing here, WANchain, I finally cut that one loose. It was getting really choppy and annoying, so I got out of the way. I'm glad I did because it just drifted lower ever since. But on the daily chart, it's right back at the 22 EMA, holding up potentially a secondary entry on the daily time frame, an EMA entry point. So that's how I'd be looking at that. Potentially a good move there. If it goes higher on the 4 hour is where I would probably take it. I wouldn't preempt it. I'd wait for some confirmation. And so what I'd be looking for is a break above this resistance here. And so let's kind of walk through this. If I entered a trade here, I basically would jump on it above that, if volume was there, of course. And then your swing low could probably be either this bottom of this wick. At most, the entire swing low could be your stop, but that's about 8%, probably too wide for me. So I'd be giving it around 6 to 7 at most. And you have to on something like WAN. It's just high ATR, very wide and loose. And then be looking at about that as your first target, which even if it just does a double top here, that's an 18% trade, almost a 3R multiple. It'd be worth taking the trade. And then, of course, if it breaks out, hey, even better, right? So WANchain's still on the radar. The daily chart still looking strong. The volume is very strong. And so from that perspective, not going to complain on that one. Let me see what the BMI is on this guy. I know I saw an alert come through here recently, so I should have a BMI rating on it. So let me see here. WANchain, where's WANchain? Maybe it was yesterday. Let's see here. I'll move. Steamback dollars, huh? Raven. Oh man, did anybody get Raven? We were talking about that one last week. I didn't jump on it, but I projected some targets and it hit the target like perfectly. It was nice, but it was choppy on the way up. No, I thought WAN was moving yesterday. Maybe it was a different alert. It's okay. Let's go look at Raven. So what I was looking at on Raven, look at that, still going. Somebody was asking about this one on the Slack group. And at the time, here's where it was at. It was looking bearish at the time here. This is what it was looking at, but it did look like it was potentially putting in a bottom. And then when I replied, I think it had just made this pop higher. And so I mentioned, hey, that's a pretty good fib target. Here's how I would play it. I would just play it for a fib bounce up to the 618, and of course start trailing it from there. Maybe it gets to the top, but 618 would be my target. And then it pulled right back in, but made a higher low. And this was kind of a good secondary entry point against a stop against this support here. It's a little bit choppy over the weekend, but went to the 618. Ideally, that's probably where I would have banked some of it. Maybe not all of it, but I would have banked some there. And it's a little bit higher now. It's fully retraced right back to the swing high back here. So nice little move if you caught it on Raven. All right, so we did a VeChain, BTC. We didn't do Zcash. Let's do Zcash. Is Zcash finally done dying? Zcash has just been this grind lower for quite some time. Zcash is actually looking pretty good here. So breaking below this downtrend, and I'll clear the line there, but that's nice because it had a little bull flag here. So Zcash, you can see here last week, popped, just really went symmetrical here. And this was really your breakout point here. You could have been conservative and just said, wait for it to get above that. Your stop is basically right there. And so if we zoom in on that, it's still within range. It's not bad. You might even look at this as a potential pullback entry. If it dips back a little bit to the breakout point, I'd be looking at this one as a potential pullback entry. So say it pauses here. Or I'm going to get my arrow. If it pauses here and dips to the moving averages / the breakout point, that might not be a bad place to take it. I'm going to have to probably put in a dip order for that. I'm not so sure I want to chase it here, but not too bad. And then I'd keep a tighter stop on a dip order at that point, maybe down here, 1.5% stop. But if you wanted to give it the full range, that wouldn't be bad either. It's 3%. Then you're looking at a test of the swing highs, your first target here. So about a 10% upside, 3.2 R multiple. And then above that, who knows, right? This is a counter trend trade. These are always a little bit more challenging just because there's so much resistance, right? This thing has got to backtrack all of these buyers, right? All the bag holders who are buying the dips along the way, they're going to start selling along the way up. So your first big resistance is going to be this big confluence right there. There was likely a lot of buyers buying this dip, and then it broke lower. And so that's going to be an interesting target there. At most, I'd be looking at that. Let's see what that lines up with. Is that a fib level? Maybe. Let's see here. Not quite. Your first 382, if you measure from the entire move, of course, your first 382 is way back here. So, but that does line up with this support. So maybe. That'd be a big move, though. I wouldn't bank on that. You're talking 70%. Not exactly a sure bet, but hey, this is crypto. All right. So that's Zcash. Let me close this one out. Okay, Zcash. We did VeChain. We did Cardano. Do you guys want to look at Ethereum Classic or Steamback dollars? I generally don't, but if you guys want to, let me know. Sidecoin, I'll ignore that guy. QKC is looking pretty good here. Let's go there. Yeah, I'll take a quick look at Ripple. I basically just brought the chart up real quick and then said, nah, but I'll take a look at it for you. So QKC, clear this out. Clear this out. I mean, on the positive, right? This guy here is maybe finding a pretty good low here. Very clear support level being formed. Finally seeing some volume come back in. Sorry about all my jumping around. I'm just trying to adjust this for us. Right there. Got some volume coming in right here. That was a big red candle here. Don't like that one bit. Big bullish reversal candle or bearish reversal candle on the highest volume since the entire move of the low. So that alone would probably be enough for me to pass on it. But if there's any kind of fundamental catalyst that could drive this guy higher, maybe I'd take a small trade on it. And I wouldn't give this support as my low. I'd probably give that as my low. And if it undercut that, I'd probably get out of the way. So even then, that's 8-9%. But QKC, as we know, 8% to the downside, you're going to get 20-30% to the upside. So first major resistance, if it can clear this red candle, this ugly candle, then I'd be looking at about here, so 28% or so for the first target there, and then there on the upside if it can swing high. So yeah, it's not bad. It's not worth it might be worth a shot, maybe a smaller position with a tighter stop. It is flat here. Looking at XRP again, and my general opinion of this guy has been it's trending lower. It's, it has these quick false moves to the upside, just bearish in general versus the BTC. And until that changes, not a whole lot I want to do with it. So I'm just ignoring it. The moving averages are still inverted, knowing that at any time, right, you can get one of these unpredictable moves that pop it like that. Then I may look at it again. Like during the last one, it looked like, okay, maybe it's getting going. I didn't jump on it. I was just going to wait for some confirmation. But, of course, those have all fizzled out. So what would do it for me would be massive volume that pushed it above this, and then potentially like some sort of little bull flag or some pause secondary entry point. And then at that point, I'd like to jump on it and then trade the next momentum leg higher. I'm just not inclined to bottom pick this guy. So gonna just wait on this one. It's not really on my radar until it can look a little bit better. Okay, I think that's it. Let me go to the last list I published here. You were looking at it from the USD side. Yeah, I mean USD, it's gonna look a little bit better just because Bitcoin's edging higher. Most of these names are gonna look better on the USD side. But the question for me is always, do I want to be in Bitcoin or do I want to be in this particular alt, right? And a lot of these look really good USD wise. So if you're sitting on, on cash or fresh capital, for sure, right? These are breakout candidates. EOS, for example, looks great from the USD side. I'm looking at it as a symmetrical breakout on the BTC pair. And so a lot of these certainly look primed and ready to rock on the USD side. And I think that's largely, they're holding up okay versus BTC. So something to watch, right? Neo USD looks like it wants to break out. EOS looks like it wants to break out. I mean, most of these look like they're ready to break out. Cardano is already breaking out. Omise Go, nice little pullback here. Probably a good secondary entry point. Ontology still heading up. So a lot of these are looking pretty good versus the dollar pair. Dash, nice little healthy pause here over the last week. Potentially breaking higher here. It looks good versus BTC too. So yeah, it depends on your strategy, right? If you're coming in fresh, certainly something to look at from that perspective. If you're holding BTC, that's how I am right now. I'm predominantly BTC. Then I'm looking for those names that are going to outperform Bitcoin right now. So let me see here. The last couple setups I mentioned, Neo. Let's see, Link. We'll pull that one up. I mentioned BCH, IOTA, Lisk, ARN, Dash, VeChain, Icon. Okay. Let's see some of these that we didn't look at. Let's pull up Link and IOTA. See how it looks. I was looking at Link as a potential breakout candidate. It wicked a few times, couldn't quite hold it. Pulling back right now. It's still playing out, though. It's still kind of developing, so we'll see. On the daily chart, 12,500. If it starts to hold above that, then I'm going to be a little bit more interested in it. IOTA, not a whole lot going on there. I do like the volume that it popped in here recently off the lows. This guy here, that's bullish. The pullback volume has been relatively light, so that's good. But again, for me, it's a confirmation game. So it's on the radar, but I want to see this guy show some follow through, not just chop around here for a month and a half. I don't have that kind of patience. Now, from a long-term hold and all that stuff, certainly that's a different ballgame. But from a trading perspective, I I lose patience if it sits choppy for a month when there's other things moving. We talked Dash, VeChain, Icon, BNB, OMG, ADA. Let's see, Lisk. Lisk, maybe a pullback entry on Lisk. Coming right back here to these moving average pairs, holding above the 10 EMA. I mean, it's a big retracement, but it's technically still right here above this breakout point. So maybe. It's a wide and loose chart, though. These are always tough. Okay. Anything you guys want to look at other than these here? Is that an LBC? Library credits? That's a name from yesteryear. Library credits. Man, I used to own some library credits back in the day. Oh. That's what I'm watching here, but it could swing high up to that point. Maybe a range trade. Yeah, long-term bottom looks pretty good. I mean, look at this long base here in December, starting to step higher here a little bit. The question is this a long-term bottom that turns into a big rally, or is this a long-term bottom that just basically chops range bound here, right, and just becomes a new value for this? I don't know. And I haven't kept up with the program with this project, so I have no idea. I mean, I still get the occasional email from them, and I have no idea if this is going to be something viable long term, because there's, since they started, there's like a million new coins now. There's competitors, so who knows? I'd be watching it maybe up to this point here. Above 1400, that little zone here is probably good. That'd be a profit taking zone for me. Okay. I believe that's it here. Let me see. Monero. We talked Raven already. Ontology, MFT. Nice volume spike coming in there. Hate these low sat names. Looks like it held that double bottom there. That's nice. Let me clear that out. This is more of a longer swing if I trade something like this, kind of a multi-day or multi-week swing, but a little bit of a double bottom. And generally on a double bottom, I like to buy early in the double bottom. The traditional way of buying the double bottom is you wait for the breakout above the neckline, it confirms, you get a measured move, up through that guy here, which means your target is here, and that's where you trade the double bottom, right, on the breakout. If it looks like it's forming a pretty good double bottom and there's support, I'd like to get in front of support. I'll wait for some confirmation, so I won't necessarily buy. I won't buy this guy right here, but if it starts to do this, and then break higher, making higher lows, buying here is not a bad place, because then you got a clear stop. You got to stop here. You can stop right below that. And what I'll do is into the double bottom breakout, depending on the risk reward ratio, I may take some profits there. Then if it breaks out, and then if it does one of these, let's say it breaks out, and then it pulls right back in, hits this part, and then holds, then I may add at that point. And that's a whole other trade. But that's a couple ways. There's 3 ways to do it, basically. You buy the breakout, you buy a throwback to the breakout, or you buy at the bottom here near the double bottom, and that's usually your best entry point. Is it better generally to buy supports or breakouts? The short answer is it depends on the market conditions, right? So if you're buying a strong name, let's say something that's trending higher, for example, a Binance coin, you're better off buying pullback entries on something that's very strong and trending higher, right? Because you're betting on the strength of the trend, you're betting on continuation, right? So when you're buying something like this, if you're watching this guy, you know, you're buying, like, let's say it pulls back, maybe you take a shot at it here, here's a support level here, and you got a very clear stop. If it's a very short-lived consolidation like this, where it tightens up at the range, at the highs, that's making new highs, I'll generally buy the breakout there. I'll buy those breakouts, right? So it just depends. But on a stronger name, bigger term, longer term chart, you can do pretty well buying the pullback entries, because these pullback entries correspond with some moving average pullbacks. You know, on the breakouts, if you buy too late, it's more of a momentum trade as opposed to a swing trade. So on a breakout, if I buy the breakout, I'm going to take some off the table right away, sell into the spike, and then let some kind of run from there. So it's a little bit different strategies. It depends on the base too. My favorite breakout base is probably the ascending triangle base, right? Who keeps thumbing down your videos? There's a small contingent of the node haters group on our Slack group. It's okay. They're always welcome to keep joining and watching. Oh, let's see here. It's funny how people thumbs down and stay silent. No feedback. Ethereum Classic. We'll do a couple more, and then we will call it a stream. Yeah, I don't know. Ethereum Classic. Just not excited about Ethereum Classic for some reason. May have found some support here. This is a daily chart. If you look at Ethereum Classic, it's just so wide and loose now. But maybe found some support there. I mean, long term, I'm not a fan of it. Just so you guys know where I stand with Ethereum Classic. Like, it's not something I would hold for the long term, but maybe for a trade. I don't know. There's better options out there, maybe. Okay. Let's see here. We did that one. Oh, Moneros. Let me take a quick look at Monero. Monero. I was watching this one for a potential trade. It's been choppy here the last few days, but maybe getting going again. And now that it's pulled back here, this is interesting. So let's say you really like this one now. This provides a better stop point, right? Now that it's had this slight pullback to the moving averages and popping off, that's where I put my stop personally. I wouldn't give it much more than that. I'd play it a little bit tighter. And then you can range trade it either up to the top of the range, and then if it breaks out, that's another entry. So if you like this as a potential breakout candidate, you know, this is like a little bit of an early entry point. And then on the breakouts, I mean, it's got some room to go. So if it can break out above this resistance, and notice this line here corresponds with support back here. And so that's a good resistance breakout point right there. That's prior support. Here it paused. Here was resistance. Looks like it wants to break out. So if it finally does clear that level, it'd be significant. Might have to look at some Monero. I'm going to drop this guy on the list here. Monero. Oops. Monero there. Okay. Did have Mana on the list. Mana was a breakout candidate over the weekend. I didn't take this trade, but it did break out, pulled right back in, hit the bottom of the line. That's interesting. And then just ran up again. So a little wide and loose, but if you would have caught some of this here, maybe it would have made for a quick 9%. Came all the way right back. So not a lot of follow through just yet. But if you look at it this way, it is maintaining this bottom trend line still. So holding up well. Maybe this is a good buy the dip candidate. Buy these dips into the trend line. Tighter stop at that point. Okay, well, that's all I got here. I'm liking OMG again. Maybe I'll have to re-enter that for a new trade. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to Bitcoin here. Bitcoin's looking pretty interesting here. If it can here today clear this swing high, that would be positive. That'll really start to confirm some upward momentum here. So that's what I'm watching here. If we can clear that, would look good. But most importantly here is just holding the support here at the lows. So these little wicks down here at the lows, that's going to be your key support here today. Break below that, things may start to quickly move lower. So we'll see. Right now, leaning slightly bullish, and there's no reason to. There's no sell signals yet, so other than it's just moving slower than we want it to. Okay. Well, thanks guys for watching. I don't think we have any more, so unless you do real quick, pop them in. If not, we will call it a stream. Let me take a quick look at the stock market while we're at it. I was trading a few. I took only 3 trades today, not a whole lot. 3 for 3 though, so I can't complain. SPY had a little shakeout, and I went flat after that, and I'm glad I did. I haven't done anything since then. Had this, things were looking okay. It was kind of slow, and then out of nowhere, this big spike. This was kind of on some China news. I closed out my last trade when I saw that. Then it popped right away, but I thought I'm not gonna. I think I may be done for the day, and kind of glad I did. It's just been choppy ever since. So I was looking at some of the China names. They all got smacked too. The trade that I was in, by the way, let's see how it looked. I was in Tilray at the time, and yeah, I'm glad I got out. Not a whole lot since. Still holding support, the lows. Yeah, Tilray was a bounce trade. I was buying this guy here. It held $70 support and started to rally. I was looking for a bounce into the VWAP. That was going to be the trade. And then this little candle here, this red candle, that was the SPY breaking lower. And so I got out at, I think, 70.90 is when I jumped out of Tilray. I said, forget it, done. Then it pulled back, popped, and I said, no, I'm not going to get back in it. Went, left the screen, took a break, got some coffee, came back, still nothing. So I'm probably done for the day. I got a spring training baseball game to go to later. I'm going to enjoy some nice hot weather. Baseball season here. Airports are crowded. Things are crazy. Good times. Let me see, what else was I in? Stone. Traded that guy. That was a good sell. Trying to think what the last one was. Can't even remember. I trade new stocks every single day. That's how hilarious. Oh, Derm. I was going to say, how can I be forgetting this guy? Yeah, Derm. Derm hit my... Came close. I was looking for 1440 on this guy. Hit 1438. And then I was trailing it up, raised my stops. Basically got out at $14. So haven't missed anything. No big deal. All right. Well, that's going to do it for today, guys. We'll see how things go in the crypto space. Looks like stocks are taking a little bit of a breather now. One thing I am watching, by the way, is the gold markets. The FOMC does meet again today and tomorrow. There's going to be some meeting minutes. May make for some good trading on the stocks, the gold stocks tomorrow. So something I'm going to be watching here. Okay, well, thanks for being here. We will see you all on the Slack. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me there. Talk to you guys later.